vines. But the actinovate really will stop it very well.
Does the Moy Grande bloom as profusely as the smaller hydrangeas?
And it's Moy, M-O-Y,
Moy.
named for Mr. Moy, Ying Dun Moy. Ying Dun Moy, interesting man. Immigrated from China. He was a professor at one of the universities over there, and probably the foremost authority in the world on lychee nuts. I just find this an interesting story. He ran from Red China, as you might imagine, came to the San Antonio Botanical Garden, and because he could not prove his education, I mean, he came with no papers, nothing more than his family he escaped with, and so they could not give him the kind of position that he deserved. They basically gave him a gardener position, but made him a very special gardener. And I'll never forget the day that went down when the director, way back then, our current director would have probably been all in favor of it, but was literally tearing his hair because Mr. Moy on his own had gone out and plowed up an area of grass about as big as his seminar area because he wanted to plant more flowers. But you can't do that sort of thing unless you get 20 forms of permission when you work from the city. But anyway, Mr. Moy is now with the Mercer Arboretum in Houston. He had a little falling out with the previous director at the Botanical Gardens. But Moy was a very, very interesting person. But they're pretty much going to grow just like most of the other mallows. Anything else about, yes?
They take more feeding.
Not really.
Than, like,
the more you feed, the more flowers you will get. But that goes for just about anything. Most people do not fertilize their plants. You know, with chemical fertilizers, you overdo it and you have real problems. With organic fertilizers, it may hurt in the pocketbook, but the plants just absolutely love it. And no, I don't think there's any problem. And if you would feed your annuals the same way you feed them, you'd be amazed what the annuals would do. Okay, I want to show you a weed right now. For anyone that says, I have a big area to cover and I can't grow flowers. This is a little tropical plant that you should know about. The common name of this plant is clock vine. I'm not sure why they call it that, except that if you watch the clock, you could watch this thing grow about as fast as the minute hand would move on a clock. This is probably the fastest growing, almost invasive flowering plant you will ever see. It comes in a yellow form and comes in an orange form. It is a thunbergia. Now there are lots of different kinds of thunbergias. I planted 3 of these plants on a fence that would be as long as from here to the back corner of the seminar area. Put them about 6 feet apart on the fence. And within a month, the fence was solid green foliage. And I don't think there was a day last summer that there weren't at least 500 or 1,000 flowers open on this plant. But it took over the fence, it took over the flowering bed. If I'd left my car parked for more than 3 days in front of it, probably would have taken that over. But this is one of the fastest growing, most free blooming vines in the world. And if you're ever trying to cover a huge area at very little cost, you need to try planting the clock vine. Now for me, the yellow form was more vigorous, shall we say, than the orange form. Where I had the yellow planted, it tended to kind of overgrow the orange form. So I don't know if you want to mix them or not. I probably had 100 yellow flowers for every 1 orange flower I had. But like I say, it's a form of thunbergia. Last winter was a mild winter. My plants have come back out. They did not freeze. I mean, they did not freeze and die. They froze back to the ground. But if you're looking, if you had a lot of sun, this fence is, sits out in pretty much full sun all day long. But if you were looking for the vine that took over, clock vine is a tropical vine that you probably would want to think about growing.
Are they Roundup ready?
I haven't tried. I just limit it with the pruning shears.
Well, no, we live on a farm, so and there's farm all around us, so everything I grow has to be Roundup ready, or it doesn't make it past the season.
Roundup would very definitely burn the foliage. Whether it would kill it or not, I don't know.
Does it require a lot of water?
Once it's established, not unusually so. I probably watered about every 10 days last summer, and we certainly didn't have any rain to supplement. But I would not say it's a high water user at all.
Not shade tolerant?
You'll grow in the shade, but it won't give you flowers. This, I think, is a plant that is very, very underused in this area. This plant is called Ixora, I-X-O-R-A. The culture on it is virtually identical to a hibiscus. It is a little bit more forgiving than hibiscus if it gets too dry, but if you let it get too dry, it will drop a lot of yellow leaves. And it's slightly more cold hardy than a hibiscus. I've seen them totally unprotected go down in low 20s with very little damage. The colors are pretty much limited to this brilliant orange, and then there's sort of a golden yellow, and then there's one that is a rosy pink color. But again, I don't know why it's not grown more widely. You can see literally every tip here has this huge clusters of flowers coming out. They bloom almost constantly. I think, gosh, people that we got to try them last spring have flowers on them every day of the summer. They will grow in anything from if just afternoon sun alone. Actually, half-day sun is probably enough, but they will also tolerate the full hot sun. And again, I don't think I've ever seen an insect problem on them. I don't know that I would put them right next to the swimming pool, because when the blooms fade, they all tend to drop off. And as you can see, what do you think? There are maybe 100 flowers in that cluster right there. It will shed a fair number of flowers. But Ixora is just a plant that deserves a lot more attention than it gets. Full grown, they seem to grow to about 4 feet in height to maybe 3 feet in diameter. They just make, you know, kind of a big pillar. But I have not found any negatives to Ixora, and fortunately, our growers are starting to grow more of them. There was a time that we recommended them real highly, and then would tell everybody how wonderful they were, and then we couldn't find any of them to sell. But nowadays, most of the bigger growers are growing at least 3 different varieties of them. So if you're looking for something that your neighbors probably haven't discovered yet, try the Ixora. I think you'll be really pleased with how they grow and bloom. Yes, ma'am?
I have one of those on my back porch that gets afternoon sun, and it's about 3 years old. It's not blooming very well.
How often are you feeding it?
Probably once a month.
Feed it a little bit more often, a little bit more heavily. And it could be, how big is the plant and how big is the pot?
It's about twice as big as that. The pot's about a little bit bigger than that pot.
Maybe put it into a slightly larger pot, feed it a little bit more, and it should get back to blooming profusely.
So I shouldn't prune it at all?
You can if you want to, and if it doesn't have a lot of buds on it, now would be the time to prune it. But I think it's just hungry.
Should be deadheaded?
They tend to drop all the flowers, no reason to deadhead, and they don't form any seed pods. So it's not like they're taking anything away from flowering again. But again, just a great, great plant that people just, I don't think have discovered. How many of y'all have grown this plant before? Anybody else grown it? Have y'all been pleased with what it's done for you?
It just didn't flower very much for us, but I think maybe we're not feeding it.
More sun, more fertilizer. Make a big difference. Here's another plant that I think is very underused, although it's a little bit different, a little bit unusual. This plant is one of several in the genus that is called a Jatropha, J-A-T-R-O-P-H-A. It blooms, if it gets enough sun, it literally blooms all the time. Now from a botanical point of view, see, I'm an old biology teacher, so I find things like this very interesting. The flowers are either male or female. You probably would never notice a difference unless you studied, but if you want to impress your kids, or if you're a biology teacher, this is the plant you need to use to teach monoecious, dioecious, perfect, imperfect flowers, things like that. The flowers with the yellow center right there, that's the male flower that has the pollinia, the stamen and pollen. This flower right here that doesn't have that, if you look at it carefully, that's female flower. And the little dark thing in the center is the pistil. Okay, now I've got through being my educator for the day. Put this out where it gets good, at least half-day sun. And again, the more sun, the more flowers you will have. Ate lunch yesterday down at La Fonda down on Main, and they were cleaning the patio.